James, have you joined the meeting?
Julie, it's Debbie. I don't see James or Dr. Stanger online yet.
Yeah, it doesn't appear that they are.
So I'm going to hold for a moment to call us to order.
Hey, Debbie, this is John Hart. How are you?
I'm good, John. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, I didn't know if you got the word that I was covering for Anna today.
I did. Thank you.
Okay, good. You got the B team today. I'll do my best.
Not at all. We're happy to have you aboard.
Thanks.
Debbie, this is Julie. I'm just checking my email quickly to see if either James or Dr. Stenger indicate they're having any problems.
Thank you. Oh, I see Dr. Stanger has joined.
Yes.
Good.
And I don't have anything from James, so.
So just one more time, James, just confirming if you're out there on one of the cell phone numbers. Can you just come off mute and confirm if you're there? So Julie, we have board members. I'm sorry, 4 board members present right now.
Yes.
So is that?
You do have a quorum, so you are able to start the meeting and conduct the hearing.
Okay, let's go ahead then and call to order the Board of Health, and we'll start with our first agenda item, which is the COVID-19 briefing, and I'll turn it over to Ellen to start that.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Cindy to start with the case numbers and any overviews she has, and then I will go after that and then ask Sarah to fill in on operations. Cindy?
Sorry, my computer's hesitating to cooperate with me today. So I'm pulling up the case numbers right now. I can give you a general overview while I'm pulling those exact numbers up. Basically, since our last Board of Health update, we are definitely starting to see a significant increase in cases. Our total cumulative positive cases is 560. We've now got 114 active cases. I believe that is an all-time high for us for active cases at any given time. We've had 443 recoveries and 3 deaths. Our active close contacts, we're now at over 510 active close contacts, and we have 1 active hospitalization in Missoula County currently. We have started reporting some different data on our website. So once a week, we are reporting University of Montana associated data on our website, in addition to our own data for the county as a whole. One thing I just want to clarify for people is that those, even though we're only reporting the U of M associated data once a week on Wednesdays, the UM associated cases are still counted in our daily case updates that get sent out to the media and to everyone else. So just to clarify that, we have started seeing an increase in UM associated cases, and if we continue to see that rolling in at a level where we don't have to worry about protecting the privacy of the individuals involved, which is kind of where it's at right now. We're going to watch it for about the next week. Then we'll start reporting that data more often than once a week. But up until this past week, we were only actually getting 1 or 2 cases per week. And so we were, that's why we were only reporting on a weekly basis. We've continued to increase our testing services, and we now started offering the rapid test through Abbott and or through our Abbott machine at our drive-through testing facility. We did get in our second Abbott rapid, try saying that 3 times fast, second Abbott rapid testing machine at our facility. And so we're going to start being able to do more testing using that rapid machine. Currently, we're still going through the validation process. And so every time we do a rapid test, we have to also do a second swab and send that in for PCR confirmation. So far, all of our rapid tests have confirmed out as the same when we send it in for PCR. So that's good. That means it's an accurate machine as of so far. We're going to be doing that for the first 30 days for each of our Abbott testing machines, just to make sure, and then we'll be doing sporadic spot checking. We have also, since our last Board of Health meeting, continued to increase our staffing capacity, which was in expectation that we were going to start to see that increase in cases that we're seeing now. So with that, I will turn it over to Ellen or Sarah for any additional information on COVID-19.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. So as you've heard, we do have the highest case count that we've had, and it's been a very rapid increase. The good news is we started from a very low nadir. I mean, we really hit a low point in cases as we were going into school, which gave us more room to deal with what we knew would be increased cases. But I will say that the amount of increase just in the last day, and then our new case numbers today, I think another 22 new ones today, we are definitely scurrying to continue to respond to the case investigation criteria of trying to get those completed and contacts identified into quarantine within 24 hours. So the planning and the work that the university did on their own and that our school districts have done on their own and with us over the summer is already playing out and helping. We are getting, the players know each other, that we're getting incredible cooperation and quick cooperation. I think we'll simply be challenged by the number, and that would be all of us. So that's not unexpected, but a little faster than I think we were expecting in this past week. As usual, we do look at our epidemiological data every day, but we also do meet with our epidemiological unit that is headed up by epidemiologists at the University of Montana and continue to look at things such as testing positivity rate, which when we were still at a very low point and we was running under 2%, that is good on a number of fronts. And we have tested at least 15% of the population, so that is also good. And as you test, of course, you find cases. Many of the cases, certainly not all, that we know about this week were identified through contact tracing from an initial positive case. That is also a good thing, relatively speaking, because that means the contact tracing and the follow-up testing and the quarantine are working. So again, we'll be challenged by the sheer number of it. And when you look at the number of close contacts that are being monitored right now, that is a significantly high number. We monitor them both through an electronic means if they agree to use that digital platform or by daily telephone calls. So that gives us a little more capacity by using that platform for those that are comfortable with it. We continue to look at our enforcement efforts, and Sarah can give you more on the numbers there, but a great deal of complaints have been responded to. We respond first by calling the entity that's being complained about and asking them what's going on. If they need help, if they understand it, let them know about the complaint, and then we go educationally. And then if we've gone through those steps a number of times, then we do meet as a team to determine what is the next appropriate step. And then the next step after that, of course, is to get advice from our county attorney. But mostly we're seeing good compliance, civil complaints, and we are able to ferret out those that don't seem to bring up that compliance. I've made no changes in the actual orders since May, when we went into phase 2, with one exception, when the Montana High School Association decided to go forward with school sports in high school and junior high, and that is their decision. That is not a decision that is made by local public health. That allows the teams to play regardless of what your local guidance might be for gatherings. In almost all cases, that's not a problem because volleyball and even cross country all can be managed and are being managed by the schools who have carefully planned in sort of a pod or a less than 50 format. The only exception to that are your larger football teams, AA and single A football teams. And they immediately off the bat have many, many more players that could mix during a game than those other sports. Again, that falls outside of the health officer's order. That has been determined by the governor and the high school association that they can go forward. However, to go forward with spectators at any of these activities does then bring in our phase 2 order that is based on the 50 pods or more. And again, that applies to everything pretty nicely until you get to the large football teams. So we did make an accommodation for those large football games for a limited number of spectators. And we are being asked to re-examine that number. We've not made a change to the mask order, but I did make a clarification based on both some research and some ability to deduce from that research. We did not allow face shields, and we still do not allow your regular face shield. It is not designed to protect others. Recent research came out and actually showed how a face shield directs, almost like a chimney, the emissions or the exhalations, the respiratory droplets down and out. So based on that, and based on the continued request for a type of a face shield, particularly for teachers or others that were in a care relationship and needed to be clear and better understood and not finding the clear masks to work, we are allowing for an enhanced face shield. And there's several of them that have been identified that actually both cover this way and then catch in the way that a mask would. So we're working on getting that information into a formal guidance. In October, I expect to bring to you any revisions on the mask rule. Again, you were the first with a mask rule, and then the governor came out with one that had some differences. The board had some things they wished to do that we did not accomplish the first time through. And as always, when we put out any guidance or requirement, we always evaluate what parts of it went as intended and what parts didn't go as intended. So we intend to bring you in October all of that information with possible revisions to your mask rule. And we will also bring you a breakdown of the monies that have been spent, the sources of revenue that we know we had available that have been spent, other ones that have come in directly to health departments, but also our best understanding of what is reimbursable by FEMA and what is reimbursable by the CARES Act. And I don't have a full grasp of that, but people at the county do. They'll be working with me to help me understand that, and perhaps may even bring some of them to you to help answer what questions we do have answers for. Unfortunately, we did learn a few weeks ago that FEMA has determined that no testing will be reimbursable by FEMA. And we are out there as Missoula County Health Department, and I'm glad we are, and I appreciate all your support to do the testing and expand the testing, including the quick testing that we're doing. So we're not pulling back on that, but we're looking carefully to see if that can be CARES Act supported or not. The other thing that I believe we'll be talking with you more about is the states, as of yesterday, received their first set of guidance for beginning their planning for vaccine distribution. I'm sure you read your media and know that there's a lot of questions about that. Our planning assumptions are that there will be a vaccine, and that we do have to begin now looking at in what ways our team may need to expand to assist with that. Our planning assumption does not include any reliance on vaccine, however. Our planning assumption for continuing to address what looks to be at least a fall spike, which we expected, is to address that without the availability of vaccine. The last thing I have to offer, and it's really, we will have our new website up soon, but I would like everyone to know that while we appreciate hearing from them, it is very, very difficult to get through, particularly with this increase in cases and the time crunch we are all under to get those investigated within 24 hours and help with public notifications for schools that wish to do that. It is very difficult if people use our individual emails for comments and complaints rather than the feedback portal. We do have a public information team, and they do go through that feedback portal. They do refer, they do look at themes and bring things to our attention that they can't respond to. So I just wanted to take this moment to put that plug out there. And then I would ask Sarah to talk about the real nuts and bolts.
Hey, Ellen, this is Rob Stinger. Could I make one quick comment?
I'm hearing Rob Stanger wants to make a comment. Is that okay?
Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, Ellen, especially for the other members of the board and people that are listening. When you're talking about face shields, you're talking about the use of a face shield as a substitute for a mask. And I just want to clarify for people that, especially in healthcare settings, you will see people using face shields in addition to a mask to protect eyes from droplets, and that does not carry any increased risk and actually does protect the user of the face shield. But I just want to clarify that for people that are seeing face shields used in especially a lot of healthcare settings, that is appropriate and that is the recommendation at this time. But it's different if you're using it in addition to a mask that controls, droplets from the nose and mouth versus not using it as a substitute for a mask.
And Dr. Stenger, I'll send you the more newly designed, what we're calling enhanced face shields that actually have the capturing material. It's almost like a low-hung mask attached to it, so you don't have that emission coming out the bottom. Okay, Sarah?
Hi, this is Sarah Heineman. I'm the Operations Section Chief for the COVID response, and I don't have a lot to add from what Cindy and Ellen have already described. There's over 90 individuals working within the operations section, and that's not including the rest of the response. So there's well over 100 people that are working on this response here at the health department. I will say that our testing continues to be by appointment based at the warehouse. So call 258-INFO and you can get connected to a scheduler if you are symptomatic. We can get you in and get you tested for that. And I will just reiterate that the precautions people take do make a difference. So by wearing your face covering, by social distancing, by having good hand hygiene, and very important as we move into the fall, get your flu shot. And that's all I really have from ops that hasn't already been shared. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I think with that, we'll move to our second agenda item, which is a hearing and possible action on Missoula Rural Fire District request for variance from Health Code Regulation 1 wastewater treatment and disposal systems, scheduled for 12:30. So we're just on time to have all those parties available. And Jim Irvin is up for the staff presentation on this item.
Great, thank you, Debbie. Give me a second. I have not ever shared a PowerPoint on Teams, so I'm going to give it my best shot. Tell me if you see presentation yet.
Not yet, but I'm sure it's coming. Everything's a little slower.
It's there.
Good.
Great. Okay, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. I know the applicant is also here and probably has some things to add. So essentially, we have a variance request in for variance from certain provisions in Regulation 1 to allow floor drains in the vehicle bays of a new fire station that is being built by Missoula Rural Fire Department out at the old Bonner Mill site. The proposal is for these floor drains to accept wastewater from the washing of vehicles, their fleet, their response fleet, as well as, you know, the washing of their floors. And the water that goes down these floor drains is proposed to drain to a wastewater holding tank, which will also necessitate variances from portions of Reg 1. Let's see here. There we go. So the specific provisions that are going to require a variance are Regulation 114A says holding tanks are not allowed, strict prohibition. 14B, 1B, floor drains may only be used to convey snowmelt and rainwater from a structure. B1D of the same section, the floor drain may not accept wastewater from a plumbed fixture. 14B1E, the drain line extending from the floor drain per Regulation 1 has to dispose of the wastewater above ground on impervious soil, and it must dispose of the wastewater in a location that can be easily located and routinely observed by the structure's occupants. And so, you know, again, what they're proposing is the floor drains to drain to a containment vault, in other words, holding tank. And so I'll go through really quickly, I'll go through the general property info and some of the history of the rules, and then we'll get into the staff's recommendations. So the property is located, it's addressed 8651 Bonner Mill Road. It's where the lumber is being currently stored out at the old Bonner Mill site. Current legal description is COS 6295. It's tract 1A, and it's just shy of 40 acres, 39.2 acres currently. So it's located here where the yellow dot is along the beginning of Highway 200 East, where it leaves West Riverside. So you can see this is the current property boundaries of this parcel. The fire station is proposed to be built out on the southwestern entryway there where the driveway comes in. So now it's important for me to stop for a second and explain. There's currently a boundary line relocation in the works for this property. And what that's going to do is it's going to reconfigure the boundaries of 3 existing parcels. The goal being to create a 1.64 acre tract that the fire department will purchase and construct the new fire station on. And so that's been, well, it's subject to sanitation review per 76.4 Montana Code annotated. And that sanitation review was conducted earlier this year, and they did get an approval issued in August of 2020. So to my knowledge, the BLR is poised to be filed soon to create this parcel, and we have the sanitation approval issued. However, the sanitation approval, in other words, COSA, does not allow currently for the use of a holding tank. They did get approval for a septic system and a well on site to serve the plumbing from inside the structure for the kitchen and the bathrooms, etc. But the subdivision rules under 76.4 do not allow for the use of a holding tank unless local variance has first been granted. And even then, they'll need a waiver from the state to get the COSA revised to allow for it. So long story short, should this variance be approved today, the next step will be a rewrite of that COSA to allow for the holding tank. So just wanted to make that clear on the get-go. This is the approved lot layout from that COSA, showing the perimeter boundaries of the 1.64 acre tract, along with all of the development. So up here on the northern portion of the property, you can see the drain field and replacement area that will serve the interior of the fire station. Here in the red circle is the proposed location of the holding tank. You'll notice the well is just to the southeast of it, located 50 feet away. One thing I'd point out that Dan Foltz with Territorial pointed out immediately was our staff report advised the board that the holding tank was located 100 feet from a water supply well. It's actually 50 feet is the proposal. So that was an inaccuracy in our staff report that didn't get caught. So I apologize for that. This is a general schematic of the proposed holding tank. It's going to be fabricated here in Missoula and have a high water alarm at a 75% capacity. I'll get in more specifics about the design criteria that they're proposing, but just wanted to kind of illustrate what the tank will look like. It'll be underground and sealed. And so the regulations under Reg 1 and also under federal regulations by the EPA regulate this type of wastewater pretty strictly. And so the EPA regulations say that in order to dispose of wastewater from a facility that washes, services, or works on internal combustion engines, they need to first secure an underground injection control permit from the EPA to discharge that wastewater subsurface. So based on the EPA regulations, the health code also acknowledges that and says that before we can permit a septic system that would receive a wastewater stream of this kind, they have to get an underground injection control permit from the EPA. So that's kind of how the current regs are structured, both at the federal and the local level, for subsurface disposal of this waste stream. Floor drains have been regulated over the years more strictly in the past than they are currently. They were, because of the risk they pose to public health in areas that house motor vehicles. You know, you have harmful organic compounds, potential solvents, those sorts of things that can come from engines and vehicles. They've been regulated so that they're not allowed to be tied into septic systems, like I said, under EPA regulations. What they also sometimes come with is the increased likelihood of people disposing of chemicals and hazardous waste, those sorts of things down the floor drain, which obviously is not allowed. So in the 80s, floor drains used to be much more common, even in residential garages. There were automobile shops that were tied into septic systems using floor drains. The health board in the 80s prohibited floor drains from commercial areas that wash and service motor vehicles. And then in the 90s, the EPA flat out banned subsurface injection without their approval. So for this type of waste stream. So it's kind of remained that way from the 90s until the board will remember in 2015, when we revised Regulation 1 of the Health Code, we proposed some loosening of restrictions on floor drains. And what the board adopted was that you could have a floor drain in an area that houses a motor vehicle, but it had to be designed in a very specific way. It couldn't receive wastewater from a plumbed fixture, not even a hose. It was really meant to to capture water that was dripping off of vehicles, snow melt, rainwater, precipitation, that sort of thing. And so the other thing was that pipe, from the floor drain had to extend and terminate above the ground surface so that that wastewater was, you could monitor the quantity and the potential impacts of its disposal. The sunlight would break down some of the harmful components of that wastewater. And so there was really specific parameters that these could be used. The other restriction, of course, was that this was only allowable in an area that did not house a business that washed, services, or maintained motor vehicles. So it was really meant for more residential purposes. This is the strict definition of a floor drain. It's a drain in the floor to accept non-toilet wastewater that collects on the floor, kind of like you'd expect. And then, so the other component of this, right, is that holding tanks are prohibited in Missoula County. Like I said, the Health Code Regulation 1 says holding tanks are strictly prohibited. That is more stricter than the state rules. So state rules do currently allow for holding tanks for seasonal use, and they have to secure a variance for that. And so holding tanks have been prohibited in the county. I mean, you've seen a couple variances on holding tanks in the last 5-10 years. So you'll probably remember, they've been prohibited in the county first by policy at the health department in the late 80s. And then the board actually restricted their use in 1994. And the reason is because, they're expensive to maintain. They're hard to keep an eye on. A lot of times people are using water and not thinking about where it's going. So you end up with an overfull holding tank and sewage on the ground, or worse, in the structure. So, in the past, the health department has seen enough problems with that the board in the early 90s just flat out prohibited holding tanks. Definition of a holding tank: watertight receptacle that receives wastewater for retention and does not, as part of its normal operation, dispose of or treat the wastewater. So these things got to get pumped out, right? And the wastewater has to be disposed of per state law and rule. So that's just the general sort of background of why the regulations are why they are. And so we got this variance application following a denial of the applicant's request to use floor drains and holding tanks. And the health department denying that request was not a surprise. We had had several meetings with them prior where we had discussed that. And so that was the formal action required for the variance process that where we denied their proposal. So that was on June 30th, and then on July 15th of this year, we received the application. The health department reviewed it. We did ask for some revisions and quickly received those revisions. And we're able to determine that the application was complete and schedule a hearing for today. So, in the meantime, we posted legal notice as required by state law twice in the Missoulian in early September. And we also notified all adjacent property owners of the request. And so state law and the health code set out the criteria for the board to be able to grant a variance. I'm not going to read this whole slide. I'm going to go through these in more detail, kind of one by one, and show how this proposal fits in the health department's opinion. But I would remind the board that the board may approve a variance only if it finds that all of these criteria are met. So moving forward, just keep that in mind. The variance has to be necessary to address extraordinary conditions that the applicant could not have reasonably prevented. The fire station wants to build on this site because it's a strategic location for their service area. And as we all know, Highway 200 sees a lot of accidents. That road gets very bad in the winter. So it doesn't take a fireman to understand that this is a great location for their fire station. And so the thing about this site, though, is it does not have access to city sewer. at this time. It is in the eventual service area for the planning of the sewer project, but there isn't any plans in the foreseeable future to extend mains this far out that would be able to serve this property. So the fire department has talked about in their application the need to wash their fire trucks and keep their equipment clean, keep their bays clean. And so washing on site really is integral to their functionality to be able to be to have working equipment and to be ready to respond when that call comes in. So the variance has to be shown to compliance with the requirement from which the variance is requested would result in undue hardship to the applicant. In other words, if they had to secure an underground injection control permit or take their fire trucks into Missoula and wash them at a existing car wash, they would have to show that those items would be undue hardships. And we took a look at that. Basically, the alternatives would come at a considerable cost compared to the proposal for the holding tank. I'll get into the alternatives in a minute. There are a few allowable under current regulations, but again, the fire department has said it's integral to their operations to have their facility and their equipment clean, in good working order, so that they can respond as timely as possible. In terms of the alternatives, the board has to find that the variance, that there's no alternatives that comply that are reasonably feasible. And right, that's fairly subjective, but reasonably feasible is the requirement. And so a lot of facilities like this will slope their bay floors. In other words, the slab that's in the garage bays the wastewater will just drain out onto the driveway. And that might be fine during certain times of the year, but as we all know, in the winter months, that is going to create a problem for them with ice buildup and potentially staff injuries, that sort of thing. So it's not the ideal solution per the applicant to do things this way. Again, washing off site is another option. They could transport their vehicles to an approved car wash that's tied into city sewer here in Missoula, but the fire department feels that is going to potentially impact their ability to respond to an emergency situation. There is a system that is not subsurface disposal. It's called an evapotranspiration bed. It's currently allowed under state and local regulations. And really what it is it's a lined bathtub filled with gravel. Thing about evapotranspiration beds are they're huge. They cost a lot of money. They take up a lot of space. Again, you saw the lot layout for this lot. They're kind of using every piece of this lot as it is, so they feel they would have to buy a larger property to accommodate a bed. And then they have checked with DEQ on the bed, who has claimed that there are potential risks with the deterioration of the liner and wastewater leaking from the bed over time. So they assert that the proposed holding tank is more protective and more able to be monitored for potential malfunctions. And then, to get a septic system that could receive this waste stream, they'd have to go to the EPA, secure underground injection control permitting. There would be monitoring associated with that, potential sampling. And so they're asserting that the cost is very high of that. They've also, in their application, included some communications with a representative from the EPA who, like DEQ, agrees that the holding tank is a more feasible and sensible option for this particular project. So I'd point that out to the board. So the variance requested cannot be more than the minimum needed to address the extraordinary condition. Health department feels that they are not asking for anything beyond what they would need here to have floor drains and a holding tank for the bays. And then in terms of environmental risk to public health, there's a number of things that the board has to look at and determine Staff has also looked at that, and I'll go through that real quick and present the findings. The board has to find that granting the variance will not contaminate any actual or potential drinking water supply, cause a public health hazard as a result of access to insects, rodents, or other possible carriers of disease to humans, cause a public health hazard by being accessible to persons or animals, violate any law or regulation governing water pollution or wastewater treatment and disposal, except for the rule that the variance is requested from. The variance cannot pollute or contaminate state waters in violation of the water quality rules, 755605, water quality laws. They can't degrade state waters unless authorized pursuant to state law. They cannot cause a nuisance due to odor, unsightly appearance, or other aesthetic considerations. And finally, the board should not approve the variance if the applicant's proposal is found to adversely affect the health, safety, or welfare of any individual, or cause adverse environmental effects greater than those effects caused by uses commonly permitted by the code. All right, so the health department's looked at it, and we feel that the proposal and the site conditions are suitable for the holding tank as proposed. It meets the 50-foot setback from the proposed well, which is the current setback under Regulation 1 for all sealed components. We don't have shallow groundwater on this site. Groundwater is fairly deep. So if there was a malfunction with the tank, the monitoring and alarm system hopefully would catch that right away, but it wouldn't be sitting right in groundwater and discharging directly to groundwater if that was to happen. The holding tanks proposed to, like I said, have an alarm that will signify when the tank has reached 75% capacity. It will have audible and visual alarm if it does reach that full level, and it'll have 25% reserve capacity to allow for time to get it serviced. The fire department has also said that they're going to routinely inspect the tank levels to ensure that the water levels are not exceeding the 75% limit, and that they would work with the septic servicing companies locally to ensure that the wastewater is disposed of properly, which actually is a little bit more complicated than your standard septic tank pumping. In other words, the city will not take a wastewater pumping of this type unless it's been screened, because you can get a lot of gravels and large debris in the tank. So the city has stated that they want to see the waste has been screened and that any oils on top of the water have been absorbed. And so the applicants have checked with one of the local septic servicing companies, a licensed septic pumper, and they don't foresee any problems with being able to first afford to have that done and to get that service from a local company. And so the wastewater treatment plant, if the wastewater is serviced in that way, has said that they will accept that waste stream. The other option is the state rules do allow for licensed land application if the wastewater is handled in a similar fashion. So there's a couple of disposal options under current rules. And again, I just want to be super clear about this. This proposal is not for this holding tank to receive any kitchen water or toilet water. It is strictly water from washing vehicles and washing the garage floors that they are going to keep their vehicles in. And so there's not any black water associated with this waste stream. And the other safeguard against these environmental concerns is that the installation, the health department is recommending that the board require that a permit be secured for the proposed holding tank. And as part of that permitting process, an inspection will be required before it is put into use. So we would oversee the installation of that system directly. So with that, I would present our recommendation. The health department recommends approval of this variance request to allow the issuance of a permit. It says unsealed pit privy. That's not right. For a holding tank with floor drains, we are not waiving the fees. I changed this. I don't know what happened. We are not waiving the fees associated with this variance request. So there are some conditions we're proposing, however. You'd see them in your staff report there. They must get a wastewater treatment plant and disposal permit from the health department before installing the floor drains or the holding tank. Before they can do that, like I described, they will have to go back through the DEQ sanitation review process and rewrite the COSA. Again, that will require a waiver from the state, so there's a chance that the state might not cooperate with that process. I'll rephrase that. There's a chance that the state may choose to not approve that waiver. And if they do not get an approval for a holding tank through that review process, we are wanting this variance to be conditioned that the applicant would agree to use another approvable solution for the treatment and disposal of the wastewater generated in the vehicle bays. So the holding tank would need to be constructed and installed according with DEQ4, which is the state's wastewater regulations, including being water tested, leak tested, in other words, upon installation. No deleterious substances may be disposed of through the floor drains. The holding tank must be serviced by a licensed septage hauler as often as needed to maintain the system in compliance with variance conditions and DEQ4 requirements. The fire department must provide maintenance and pumping records to the health department upon request. The wastewater from the holding tank must be disposed of in accordance with applicable DEQ, septic pumper, and wastewater treatment plant and health code requirements, which, like I said, may include pretreatment and or testing of the wastewater. Failure to comply with the conditions of the variance and any permit issued under the variance would void this variance. And finally, this variance would not relieve the applicant of any obligations under other local, state, and federal laws or regulations. So with that, I would make a motion to the board. The health department recommends a motion for the board to grant approval of the variance request to allow the use of floor drains and a wastewater holding tank with the conditions noted in the staff report and proposed decision document.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
I see Mark Stelling, who's probably with the applicant, is on the line as well. Mark, were you wanting to make a presentation as well, or any comments from the applicant?
I'm with the architect on this team, but I think we'll let Dan Foltz with IMEG, who is doing the civil design, speak to this matter a little bit more intelligently.
Okay, awesome. Dan, I didn't see you on the list, so you're probably on a cell phone. So Dan, if you want to come off mute and speak on behalf of the applicant, that would be great.
Yeah, can you hear us here, Debbie?
Yeah, gotcha.
Awesome. So I'm here, Dan Foltz of Territorial Land Works, now IMEG. As Mark said, we're doing the civil on this project, and we also have Chris Newman here with the fire station. And then Mark and Jackie with MMW are also on the line. First, I just want to say thanks for Jim and the health department staff. They've been really attentive, and I think Jim did a great job of the staff report and presentation. Because he did such a great job, we didn't prepare a presentation. It would have just been a reiteration of what Jim walked us all through. But I just wanted to let you guys know we are available for any questions that the board may have or any clarifications. So just let us know what you need.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I think with that, I would entertain a motion from a board member so we can move into questions or comments.
I'd be happy to make that motion, Debbie. This is Amber Sherrill.
Thank you, Amber. With that, do we have any board questions or comments on the motion on the table? Amber, I'll go on a voice call on this. Amber, do you have any questions for staff or the applicant?
I don't. I thought that was a very thorough presentation. So any question I had got answered during the presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Pam Boyd, do you have any questions or comments?
I do. I have a couple of questions. One, I didn't see anything in the material that we got that talked about how far away this holding tank was from the river. So if somebody could let me know about that.
Jim or Dan, do you have that data readily available?
Dan, can you speak to that? I know that it's well over 100 feet, but I'm not sure that I've measured that exactly.
Yeah, let me work on that for just a second. I don't have it either. It's quite a ways, but I will do a quick Google Earth and get you that information.
Okay. Pam, did you have another question? Pam, if you do have another question, you're on mute. I wasn't sure.
Sorry, I am. So in the past, we have refused a variance for a holding tank for Kettle House as one entity that is in a similar location or close by location. I'm wondering if we did grant a variance for this, if that would have any future implications for how we had to deal with the Kettle House.
Jim, I'm not sure if you can speak, or maybe Shannon, to the differences between the Kettle House application and this application being specific for vehicle wash water versus what might have been considered at Kettle House.
Sure, I could address that. I mean, the amphitheater was a different project in that they would have been proposing a holding tank to receive bathroom wastewater from, I think it was 4,000 potential concert goers there. And so the quantity of wastewater was much, much greater. And we, as the health department, would have been much less likely to support that proposal than we are this due to that.
Well, and I understand that, and we didn't grant that variance, but I'm just wondering if the Kettle House would have any legal ability to come back and say, oh, you've granted a variance for this much holding, and therefore you need to relook at ours or whatever. I don't know.
I think for the record, I don't believe that they actually proposed holding tanks as part of their variance procedure. I know that it was discussed during that, but the two variances that were granted for that project were to allow the use of chemical toilets. So, and it's, in terms of the legal aspects of it, I definitely can't speak to that. So sorry.
Hey, this is Shannon. I can add a little bit to that, and that's why we go through that criteria one by one. You know, the fire department really is unique, and you have to have a unique circumstance in order to be able to be granted a variance or for the board to grant a variance. So one of the things that Marnie used to tell us is that a variance doesn't set standards, doesn't change standards, and so really when you look at what the Kettle House is doing and what the critical services that the fire department provides, it's really very different. So that's one reason why it's so important that we go through each of those criteria so the board can think about, does it really meet this criteria?
Right. Good. And I just was wondering if it would set a precedent that they could come back on. So, okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Pam. Dr. Sanger, do you have any questions or comments on the presentations?
Hey, Debbie, can I, this is Dan Foltz again. The river is approximately 1,000 feet away.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
This is Rob. No questions from me.
Okay, and just one last check. James, are you out there now? I don't hear him. I guess, Jim, I have a couple of questions with respect to the the conditions of approval. One is this permit then attached to the deed on this parcel, and would potentially the approval for the holding tank would move? I realize that fire stations are usually around for a long time, but if this parcel were to sell, would this use of a holding tank, is it really specific just to the fire department and the prescribed use? Even if like a car wash moved in, could they use a holding tank?
That's a great question. I think the current regulations would say that the variance is not transferable to next property owners. To answer your first question, if we did issue a septic permit for this, it would not be filed with the deed in the sense that it would come up in a title search. It would be held in the health department's records. But I believe the last variance we looked at for the unsealed pit privy up Highway 200 there, the board did want to see something that would be discoverable in a title search. So I think that's a great thought.
Okay.
Can I add something to that, Debbie?
Sure, Dan.
The DEQ COSA approval that we just got is very specific to only allow the use of the property for a fire station. And any rewrite of that COSA is also going to be filed and would be discoverable during a title report. So there's another kind of safeguard that would show that this is for a fire station. So. Okay,
perfect. So that would take care of that transfer issue. So the next question has to do with the possibility for public sewer extension in the future. I didn't see anything that would require this parcel to connect to sewer should it come down 200 right in front of the lot and abandon the use of the holding tank in the future if the public sewer becomes available.
So as part of the subdivision review and the permitting of the proposed septic system for this property, I think it's probably already going to be on the survey that the property owners agree to connect all wastewater connections to the system within 6 months of it physically becoming available. So I believe that deed restriction will already be filed along with the survey.
Okay, awesome. That's great news. I think that's all the board we have there on there. So is there any public who wish to comment on the motion on the table to approve the variance for the use of floor drains and holding tank at this site on Highway 200?
Hey, Debbie, this is Josh. I just want to let you know I'm here.
Oh, Josh, great. Thank you.
Caught the last half of that, and I don't have any questions. The last set of questions were super good and answers were really thorough, so I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So if you have a comment, you can come off mute, and we need you to announce and spell your name and give your comment. You can also put your name into the chat box, and we would be able to then identify you by name. I'm just gonna wait for a minute to see if anyone comes off mute to particularly comment on this motion on the table. Okay, I'm not hearing any public comments. So with that, I will, I'll do a voice vote on this just to be sure that we're recording the vote properly. So Amber, on the motion on the floor to approve the variance, signal with yes or no.
Yes.
Pam, same?
Yes.
Dr. Stanger?
Yes.
And Josh?
Yes.
Debbie votes yes, so the motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for the presentations and information and Q&A on that. Thank you very much. Next up on our agenda is item number 3, which is action on comment letter to EPA. Jim, I should just say as well, I have the I have the findings of fact, and I'll get that signed and sent back over to Julie. So you'll have that today.
So Debbie, can I add one thing? I'm going to get Julie a revised version of that. We did discover a couple of items that we changed. Nothing of, it's all grammatical type stuff. So
Okay.
Would that be acceptable?
Yes. Just have Julie send it to me, and I'll get it signed and sent back over straight away.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Moving on to item number 3, which is action on comment letter to EPA regarding Smurfit Stone conceptual site model. And I'm thinking that Travis Ross is on the phone to give our presentation on this.
Yes. Hey, everybody. So I have a presentation here as well. I can figure out sharing. Okay. Too many screens going on here. Sorry.
We got it. Got it.
Okay. So. Okay. So the conceptual site model is basically a way to develop a common understanding of the data collected to date.
So you're not coming.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just scoot a little closer here. So it's a way of developing a common understanding of the data collected.
Okay, it's not, I can't hear you anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. Can I make this better? How about now? Can you hear me?
It's good. Yes.
Okay. So it's a way to compile the body of knowledge regarding the contaminants and the site geology, hydrogeology, and have that available for.
Travis, I'm sorry to cut in. This is Julie. It's very difficult to hear what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Okay. Let's see. I'm sorry. I don't know what the problem is here. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, and please let me know if you can't hear me again and figure something out. So for Smurfit Stone, there's been approximately, since 2014, data has been collected on this site, and in fact, there was some data collected prior to that in 2011, which I will get to. But the primary data sources for this conceptual site model are data that have been collected from 2014 on through 2019. And it's to understand how contaminants move through the site and how they potentially interact with the Clark Fork River. So as we've been, this came out a little over a month ago, and what we've been reviewing this, Water Quality District staff has been reviewing it along with numerous other stakeholders, and some of the things that we've identified. First of all, we agree with the objectives of this conceptual site model and are happy that it's been developed. It's a good starting point to understanding the remedial investigation and eventual remediation that needs to occur on the site. But fundamentally, we see continued incomplete characterization of the groundwater underneath the landfills and sludge ponds associated with Smurfit Stone. That's approximately 160 acres, and the site has 56 monitoring wells on it, but given the size of the site, 3,000 acres, it's difficult to get a complete understanding of contaminant transport, presence, and the geology and hydrogeology with that number of monitoring wells. So in this figure, you can see I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'll try anyway. So this is the industrial area in the pink. These blue are all monitoring wells. This green one is a deep monitoring well. This area, pond 8, these are solid waste basins here. This is kind of the sludge pond area. And you can see, there are some monitoring wells, but this is approximately 160 acres. So not a lot to characterize the groundwater underneath those solid waste basins. The other thing that is concerning is this is a really complex site. So not only is it big, but it's complex. There are 3 groundwater units or aquifer units that are described in the conceptual site model. Most of the contamination that we're seeing and examining is in the shallow aquifer. But within that shallow aquifer, there's really complicated flow regimes going on because of, you can see in this 1955 aerial photo, the old oxbow channels that were laid throughout geologic history. Those create preferential flow paths. And you may recall in 2019, the department conducted some investigation along with Silixa, a company in Missoula, to look at temperature changes along this section of the Clark Fork, and we did see some variation and some potential pathways that were distinct through the Clark Fork. So we know this is a complicated environment, and this conceptual site model doesn't really acknowledge that complication and that need for additional understanding of contaminant transport through those preferential flow paths. This figure shows total dissolved solid concentrations. Those are a surrogate or a marker for contaminant transport during mill operations. So the arrows show the groundwater flow directions, and the contours show those total dissolved solid concentrations. And they
Hey,
don't.
Travis, your screen hasn't changed, or the screen we're looking at.
Okay. I'm just going to and reshare. Did that change?
No.
No. Okay. Well, I'm going to explain. You can see it. You can see arrows showing the total dissolved solid concentration gradient there, and so we know that that contaminant transport isn't simply a factor of groundwater elevations, and is often in a homogeneous setting. This is more complicated. Especially when we're talking about landfills that have disrupted the typical geology that would be found on site, and the berms that are present on site. There's been a lot of anthropogenic disturbance to the site. So the other thing that is a concern with the conceptual site model is we don't really have a great understanding of the interaction of landfill materials with the seasonal high groundwater. So that that there aren't enough monitoring wells to determine how much of those solid waste basins are inundated. We do know there are a couple of solid waste basins that that do have monitoring wells in them. One of them has anywhere from 4 to 6 feet of saturation at the bottom of that landfill during high groundwater, and the other is closer. So we need a better understanding of high groundwater interaction with the bottom of the dumps. And the other thing that's missing is often you will have plume maps associated with these sites, and it shows the extent, kind of in a plan view, of contamination across a site. This document does not go there. It doesn't have those figures, and that would be helpful in understanding the site.
Thanks.
And really, a complete understanding of contaminant transport is foundational for a successful remediation and the protection of public health. So those are the basics of what we see as flaws or needs for improvement on this conceptual site model. There will be a public presentation by the consultant who's the representative for the potentially responsible parties. That'll be on October 13th, the evening of and time of the Water Quality Advisory Council meeting. Public comment will be extended 2 weeks following that. And so we'll be compiling some comments from the district as well. But I wanted to mention that as well. So I apologize that my presentation wasn't working, but appreciate your patience. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to and Elena Evans, our hydrogeologist, is present as well. She may be able to go in more detail.
Okay, thanks, Travis. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the comment letter regarding the Smurfit Stone conceptual site model and authorize the board vice chair to sign the letter.
This is Pam. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Pam. With that motion on the floor, are there board or staff questions or comments on the presentation? I'll go by voice call here. Amber, do you have anything?
I don't. I was honestly having a hard time on the phone hearing the whole presentation. I apologize about that, but I don't have any questions.
Okay. Pam, do you have any questions?
I don't.
Okay. Dr. Stanger?
No questions. Thanks, Travis.
Okay. Commissioner Slotnick, any questions?
Sure. Travis, this seems like there's been a kind of a long-standing disagreement on what really is the best way to get a handle on what's going on in terms of groundwater, and that this is a heterogeneous site and there isn't such thing as a representative sample, so that almost no reasonable number of monitoring wells will really let us know what's there. Do you feel like there's a resolution to be had here, or are we just kind of dug in on two different positions and that's how it's going to be?
That's a really good point. There certainly could be more than what we have right now. It's in our opinion grossly inadequate. But you're right. It's difficult to characterize a landfill, and this conceptual site model, in our opinion, needs to address that. Needs to acknowledge that complete characterization is going to be impossible, or difficult at least. So yeah, there's a combination of those two. Need more data because it's a risk-driven examination. So we have to know, have some degree of confidence in the data collected. But we need to also acknowledge that there's never going to be enough to thoroughly characterize this dump environment, at least.
Thanks.
I think Travis, for me, I think that the letter is good for this particular audience because we're writing to an audience that's technical. I think that certain other recipients, we would need to have really specific bulleted recommendations for what we want to see right at the top of the letter, because they might not read the entire content. For this one, I'm fine with this, but in the future, or maybe following the Water Quality Advisory Council presentation, you might consider some really specific bullets, like we want you to do this, or we want to see this in the report, because not I think the technical folks, but others can lose track of what we're actually asking for in terms of change.
Certainly, that's what we're preparing from the district section by section. But thank you. Debating on how to approach it from the board's perspective.
Yeah, I think for this audience and in this context, I think that this works. So,
okay, great. Thank you.
I'll take now ask for any public comments on the motion on the floor to approve the letter to the EPA regarding the Smurfit-Stone conceptual site model and for authorization to sign the letter. So if you have public comments on this agenda item, if you can come off mute and identify yourself and make your comments.
Debbie, this is Julie. I see no indication in chat of interest in making comments.
Okay, and I don't see anyone coming off mute either. So with that, I'll do a roll call vote on the motion on the floor. Amber, indicate your vote with yes or no.
Yes.
Pam, same.
Yes.
I'll ask for James in case he's out there. He didn't identify himself. Okay, no James. Dr. Sanger?
Yes.
Commissioner Slotnick?
Yes.
And Debbie votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Travis.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda is item number 4, which is approval of the August 20th, 2020 minutes of the Board of Health. We do have those, so we could call for a motion and see if there's any amendments from anyone.
I'm happy to make that motion, Debbie. This is Amber.
Thank you, Amber. Any board comments on the minutes as presented?
It looks like it's a complete transcript of the meeting, which is very thorough. So good. I didn't see anything that was not said.
Very good. With that, I will take a roll call vote. Amber, how do you vote?
Yes.
Pam?
Accept.
Dr. Stanger?
Accept.
Josh?
Accept.
Debbie accepts as well. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Next up, we have Pam, agenda item 5, Maternal Child Health Advisory Council update.
Okay, can you all see me and hear me okay?
Gotcha.
So we have been working on kind of re-identifying the Maternal and Child Health Advisory Council. We started this before COVID, and then as COVID kicked in, we sort of got discombobulated and off track. But hopefully we are back in and beginning to do some fairly significant work on setting up an action plan with goals, strategies, tasks, responsibilities, and timelines for what we have identified. So I'm going to just go through the goals that we have identified for our action plan, and I may comment a little bit on where we are with those things. So the first goal was to really define our role and relationship with the Board of Health. We feel that it needs to be bi-directional and that it needs to be more focused on actually giving advice to the board. We feel like we need to bring the board's attention to legislative issues that may affect maternal child health. And we want it to be county as well as city focused. So, I will bring this whole plan to the board once we have completed it, and hopefully we can have a further discussion about that role and relationship. Our second goal is to provide ongoing and current maternal child health assessment for the county. So this was something that we felt we need to identify issues that may be emerging, such as the effect of anti-vax information out there on the fact that people aren't getting vaccines, et cetera, the pandemic's effect on vaccines for kids, those kinds of things. So what we've done to address this is to set up a schedule of people to come in and talk to us about identified issues. And some of those issues that we've identified are vaccines, for one. WIC enrollment is another thing that we feel needs to be addressed, and we may be able to have a role in helping increase that. Legislative issues, we have gotten a new legislative member to the council, Connie Keogh, who is going to keep us advised, and so I'm very excited about that. I think that will be a great addition. How the pandemic may be affecting daycare, and so getting somebody from Child Care Resources or some other entity in to talk about what their issues are because of the pandemic, and then mental health issues for the children, and we haven't quite identified where that is going to focus yet, but those are some issues that we're hoping to address. We felt that we need to do some outreach work, and so we are in the midst of figuring out how to do that, hoping to tie in with what's already existing for the health department, but maybe expanding it to Twitter and to Instagram, some platforms that younger mothers may be more tied into than the conventional things like the newspaper, et cetera. So we're still working on that. We decided we needed to improve our internal processes. So we are now meeting remotely, and we are using Teams, we were just calling in, and this is working much better. We have standardized our recruitment. We've reviewed all of the people on the council that that we feel need to be there, and we are reaching out to people who we didn't currently have on the council to try to get them to be members. We are looking at revising our charge, and we will bring that to the Board of Health once we do that. We have changed our agenda, setting clear objectives. We are changing and clarifying our roles and responsibilities for each council member, so that if somebody joins, they will have a clear idea of what it is that they are to be responsible for. And then we are I guess that's kind of it. So those are the goals that we have kind of looked at and are currently working on. And I'm hoping we won't have this set by next month, but I'm hoping maybe November I'll be able to bring a completed version of this to the board, and we can go from there.
Great, thanks, Pam. That's really great progress on that council. Any questions from the board members for Pam? Hearing none. Julie Moore, you're up for agenda item number 6, which are instructions to complete Director Leahy's performance review for fiscal year 2020.
Thank you, Debbie. To kick off the process to complete Ellen's performance review, board members and Ellen, you will receive a set of written instructions from me today that will identify the steps in the process. So you'll get the instructions today by email. You'll also receive the instructions in print form. Ellen, of course, your instructions will also include the survey form for your self-evaluation. And for board members, your instructions will include the survey form that each of you use to complete the evaluation. All of you, except for Amber, have participated in this process on one or more occasions, so most of you are pretty familiar with how it goes. As one reminder, Ellen does not waive her right to privacy, so when you complete your forms, they do need to be treated as confidential. The instructions that you'll receive are going to explain for you how to return your completed forms to me in a way that can be both anonymous and confidential. Key details are the deadline, which is firm, is noon on Wednesday, September 30th. Also, we must have at least 4 board members participate and return a survey form in order to conduct the evaluation. And then once I receive the forms, I compile the results in an anonymous and confidential manner, send the results back to you. You'll receive the print copy of the results in your October 8 board packet. And then you'll conduct the performance review with Director Leahy at your October 15th meeting. Again, because she does not waive her right to privacy, that portion of the meeting will be closed to the public. Other details about the process are in the instruction set that you will receive again by email today and then in print form as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. And if any of the board members have questions about the process, feel free also to reach back out to Julie or to Ross or myself to answer any questions about the review process. Next up, we have Ellen with the director's report.
Thank you. Our immunization clinic is operating by appointment only, but apparently that's working. We do hope to offer and have available more flu shots this year. To keep it brief, I will just say that influenza and COVID at the same time is a possibility for individuals, and it certainly is likely to be the situation that all our healthcare providers will be facing this fall and this winter. So flu shots are coming in, and we do have flu shots that are made available for children whose family does not have the full ability to pay, and a more limited supply also for adults that may be in that same situation. All the other units are operating, many of them are continuing to operate remotely, including WIC. That's through a waiver from the state, so that those moms and families and kids do not have to enter the department. So anything that can continue to operate remotely, such as immunizations, except for immunizations and some plan reviews as environmental, are operating. We are not at full operation on all of our grants. As you probably will recall, we still have a number of our COVID staff are actually health promotion staff who are trying to do both jobs. And we're slowly trying to replace them with temporary staff. But until we can fully do that, we don't have all of those programs operating, but more than we did the last time I spoke with you. So that's the main gist of what is going on. And I should be able to give you a little bit more on our overall budget at an upcoming meeting, but as you can imagine, that entire process was affected by the pandemic and our response. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Any board questions, director questions for Ellen on the director's report?
Just This is Josh. I just had some general questions, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to get onto this meeting till close to 1. So some of the things I might ask about may have already been covered. I apologize for that. Ellen, I'm curious. There's been lots of talk out there in the kind of the general national conversation about distributions of vaccines when they come. Is this something that our local health department plays a role in, or is this a state level deal, or how do we fit into that?
We will play a role in it. We don't yet know what that role will be. I can pretty much tell you it'll at least be public information if our current experience is any evidence on that front. I don't expect, based on the little bit of information I received yesterday from the State Department of Public Health and Human Services, that we would be the main distribution point. So it would be different than the 2009 pandemic with the H1N1 vaccine, when in fact we were the only distribution point. We just hope to be one of the distribution points. And although we have heard that there will be some priority setting for high-risk people and healthcare workers, for example, to obtain the vaccine first, we are aware that there'll be a lot of distribution into the private sector, and we don't have any idea on how they would actually control that prioritization. And we also expect that there are some unique cold storage challenges beyond that what we usually have to provide. But we wouldn't be the only ones facing those. So we expect we would receive help with that. And finally, in most cases, depending on which vaccine or vaccines comes forward, we would be looking at a booster dose. And booster doses, believe it or not, are hard to make them happen. People generally will push down the door if they really want the vaccine for the first dose, but follow-up for booster dose, I think, is going to be something that we would be working on. We would have to expand, even for the few things I've mentioned, our capacity beyond what we're doing, because we still expect to be dealing with what we're already seeing this week, is this sharp increase in case activity.
Next one. Sorry here. I'm sure you touched on this earlier. To what degree would you attribute our sharp increase in case activity in Missoula, and are there some kind of public health lessons learned that are new?
Right now, I don't have any new public health lessons to share. Just a reminder that Missoula has been able to keep our numbers down, consistently down, with only 2 spikes. This is the first spike, which has occurred already in a week, that has actually brought us over 100 cases, but almost 500 contacts. It's the time of year. We are starting to see people come together more. The good news is we started at a low point, but unfortunately it is spiking rather quickly. That is not unexpected. Again, it is extremely contagious and an extremely stealthy virus that, particularly in children, does not exhibit symptoms. And so it can spread until it spreads to someone who will exhibit symptoms. And then that, of course, is where we jump in with the contact tracing and then try to work back and quarantine all those that may have been exposed.
Hi, Ellen. This is Rob. This is a little bit of a follow-up on Josh's question, and maybe a little bit more specific. But and I know you just kind of have to ballpark it probably at this point, although we are producing university-specific data. But how many of the increased cases and increased contact numbers in this recent spike do you think are associated with the restart of either school or the university?
Ellen, you're on mute.
Excuse me. I can't really give you a metric on that. It's a significant portion. And one thing that we did expect to see, and we are seeing, is that when you do have a case in a school setting, even with the excellent preparation that our schools and our university and all of our schools, from large to small, you sometimes will just automatically have more contacts to follow up on because they are already in a congregated setting. And so when you look at our number of contacts, I would ask you, as we put up our weekly reports, which we do on every Wednesday, look at the number of contacts. The number of cases is one thing, but the number of contacts is where our activity has to go in order to identify and quarantine those within 24 hours and then test. You will start to see, we have responded to the U of M's request to have university-specific data go up each week. And the state has plans for school-specific data. We just learned of this yesterday, and this is quite a bit different than what we had been working with our local schools on, unfortunately. We were not planning on releasing local school data except to a school as needed. But the state health department is now telling us that we need to release it to them, and they plan to release it. So that's something we need to communicate to our schools yet. Again, that's quite a bit different, and there was no consultation with local public health to be able to have input to that or to understand all the purposes and ramifications of that. But you will be able to see that as the state starts releasing that data every week. For purposes of confidentiality, we only release the data as necessary to carry out our duty as required by statute.
Any other questions from board members for Ellen? Okay, hearing none. We are to the section of our agenda, which is number 8, which is public comments on items not on the agenda. And I do know that there are a number of folks logged into the meeting today who likely have comments. We'll, as is customary, we'll limit comment time to 3 minutes. And I realize that some of you are on cell phones and may not be connected to the more formal Teams piece of it. So we'll get to you guys at the end, and I'll call you out. The only thing that I can see is the last 2 digits of your phone number, and I'll call you out by that. But first, for folks that are logged into the Teams, and there's already some chat out there, and so I do see those. But for those of you on the Teams section, if you can put your name into the chat box, and I will identify you for public comment. For public comment, if when you come on the line, if you can state your name and spell your name for the record, that would be great. And Julie, I assume that you're watching the chat box as well for us.
Yes, Amy Pfister, you are up.
My apologies. This is Amy Pfister, and I can't really speak because I'm driving, so it would be wonderful if you could just answer my question that I was able to put in chat.
Okay, and so Amy's question is really specific to a plan that was submitted to the health department, and I think that there may have already been potentially an answer to that about events and gatherings that have a total of 51 to 250 people, including attendees, staff, and volunteers, are allowed under the requirements. The internal COVID plan is recommended to ensure the event or gathering will meet the minimum requirements for the events. So events and gatherings that have 251 to 1,000 people are allowed under the requirements in Appendix A. And that plan, so I think that, so it says the internal plans do not need to be submitted to the health department for review and approval, but they must be maintained on site and made available to the health department upon request. So that may answer that question, Amy. The other thing that folks can do is also use the raise your hand button, and that will also identify you on the participants list that you would like to speak.
This is Julie. Ellen, are you seeing in chat Amy Pfister's question? In addition to what Debbie has indicated, Amy wrote that they submitted a request for approval of a spectator plan, and they haven't heard back from anyone at the health department. She was hoping the request would be approved today.
All the plans go to the environmental health, and that request has gone to environmental health. And I want to be careful, Madam Chairman, that I know this is to take public comment, not for me to jump in and provide other information, so I will withhold.
Okay. Jamie Wright. Yep, so you have your hand up if you would like to come off mute and speak.
Okay, you'll have to forgive me. I was actually just typing my question into the chat. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so in response to Amy Pfister's comment about us not getting approval for spectators for the visiting team for the football event tomorrow evening in Missoula, I'm just wondering if it's suggested that it's safer for the visiting spectators to be gathered outside of the fence, likely in clumps or groups, not socially distanced, because we'll need to get a good viewpoint or vantage point. And additionally, some of the spectators will likely be building their own scaffolding or ladders or anything just to see that game. And if that's suggested that that's safer than socially distanced seating plan in the stadium seats with masks required. So if you could provide clarification for me there, please.
I think, like what Ellen said, I don't know that we'll take the comment, and the comment is noted. I don't think that we're gonna that staff or the board is going to provide responses back to the comments, but we will take in all of the comments that are given at the meeting today. I'm just looking. Okay. Anyone else that, Julie, I know you're looking as well. I'm just trying to monitor if anyone else raises their hands. I think we can go down and I'll go through the cell phone numbers that are attached, because we don't have names, or you're probably not able to type a question into the chat box on your cell phone if you're not in the Teams app. So I'm just switching back and forth here. So the cell phone that ends in 35, if you have a public comment, if you want to come off mute and identify yourself for comment. Okay, I don't hear
So I think that must have been me, Jamie Bright, but you guys, well, I didn't get it answered, so thank you.
Okay. This cell phone number that ends in 37, do you have comments to give? Don't hear anything there. Cell phone number ending in 09.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I was on my cell phone and could not talk. My name is Jamie Wright, and my cell phone and work phone end in 13. My question for you is twofold today. Your order dated May 28th limits gatherings in groups from 51 to 250, including attendees, staff, and volunteers. as long as they follow the requirements listed in the Appendix A. The event has to have an internal COVID plan recommended and meet the requirements of Appendix A. And I'm asking if this is how I interpret the next statement. Events and gatherings that will have a total of 251 to 1,000 people, including attendees, staff, and volunteers, are allowed under the requirements listed in Appendix A. An internal COVID event plan is required to ensure the event gathering will meet the requirements, but the internal plan does not need to be submitted to the health department for review and approval, just needs to be maintained on site and made available should the health department request it. So with that statement, does that order dated May 28th allow groups under 100, so long as there's a plan in place, to take place? That's my comment. That's my question for you. And lastly for you, is there any availability to have an emergency focus group meeting or public comment meeting or period where we can have a dialogue regarding guidelines for spectators at sporting events? As you can tell, this is very important to us.
Ellen, with respect to the specific question about Appendix A in the May 28th order, is there any way to respond to that question?
That is an order. It's attached to Attachment A, as I described at the beginning of the meeting. And the types of questions that are coming in are answerable and are frequently asked and answerable at 258-4755, the Environmental Health Branch.
Okay.
Again, the distinction is, as I described at the beginning of the meeting, the football can go forward under the high school association rules without any spectators. What we have tried to do is to allow some spectators, even though that conflicts with the plan we've had in place since May 28th. So we found a way to do that.
Every other major county in the state has revised their spectator plans for high school sports. We're requesting that Missoula County does the same. It kind of seems silly to allow parents to come into our community, shop, eat, drink, watch a football game at a local establishment, such as a bar, but they can't sit socially distanced with a mask outside in a stadium. And there's a 10-lane track separating spectators from players. They're in a stand that can hold from 1,000 people to 2,500 people. We're just asking for the ability to set forth a plan and it be approved. But based on your Appendix A and your order, not your guidelines from August, your order, we can do that if we keep the minimum number of people to 1,000, correct?
That is incorrect. And Madam Chairman, I will not get argumentative on this. It's been asked and answered in numerous occasions over and over again. And the guidelines are attached and do reference Appendix A. So
okay.
Thank you for your patience.
Yep. And thank you for your comments, Jamie. They're noted. Let's see. Julie, are there hands raised? Okay. So I'm not sure how to say your last name, but Shiloh, can you come off mute and make your comments? Shiloh, were you wanting to make comments? I see your hand is up in the meeting.
Like I said before, this is Jamie again, but I couldn't comment when I was on my cell phone, but I could once I was on my office phone and calling in. So maybe if you're on a cell phone, you can't talk.
And so, Cindy Farr, I think you know or is Cindy still on the meeting? She is. Is there
here? I think it's *6, but I can't remember.
This is Julie. Yes. If you're calling and you're muted, try *6 to unmute.
And the other thing
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is Shiloh Lucier, Lucier. And my question and comment is, I was wondering if the health department could publicly and clearly state if the guidelines are an enforceable order or just a suggested guideline for the school districts in Missoula County. This has become obviously very unclear to the community members, and the clarification is really needed. And I would ask that if this is in fact an enforceable order, that you would direct us as to when a proper meeting and public meeting had taken place where these guidelines were discussed and then decided.
Sure. John Hart, you might speak to this as well, but orders from the health officer are enforceable by the department.
But I'm not. I'm asking about the guidelines for the athletic events with spectators in Missoula County, not the specific order regarding the 50 and then the 51 to 1,000, but the specific guidelines that are posted regarding athletic events with spectators in Missoula County.
Debbie, this is John Hart from the County Attorney's Office. I don't know the answer to that specific question, but again, I want to reiterate, as you have, and as the Public Health Officer Ellen Leahy has already, this agenda item is to make comments to the Health Board on items that are not on the agenda. It's not an opportunity, unfortunately, to get specific questions answered. That's not the appropriate forum here. And as Ellen Leahy has noted, there are resources on the Health Department's website and telephone numbers where you can contact to have these specific questions answered.
Great. And with all due respect, I understand the process that has to be made to go through this. At the same time, you can't directly answer the question, why do you think that the people that are answering the phone that we have called to try to get this answered would know? Because that's what's happening, is that question has yet to be answered.
And that question's been duly noted. Thank you very much.
I don't see other hands up. Is there any other? Julie, is there something over in the comment section?
Kim Beatty, do you have a comment?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. This is Kim Beatty. I guess my comment would be that I would very much like to see Missoula County reconsider its prohibition of having parents of visiting sports teams, athletes from attending their sporting events. I think that there's been a lot of dialogue in the community, or a lot of questions by parents, and not really a whole lot of dialogue by the county health officials as to why that ban is being imposed, and why it couldn't be lifted on a limited basis. It seems to me that 120 parents, if you will, at a high school football game, socially distanced and wearing masks in your stadium, is both doable and preferable to having them cluster together in spaces that are not socially distanced in your bars. And I would just respectfully request that you quickly and timely review and revise that policy and allow us to attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim, for your comments. Other comments?
Debbie, I'm not seeing other indications in chat.
This is Jamie Bright. I had mentioned I had a comment. Do you guys have a second for mine?
Yes.
Okay. So my comment is, as a Helena parent of a football player, we had 11th hour approval last week to attend our children's football game in Kalispell. that was just a last minute approval that came on Thursday afternoon. And I want it to be noted in the comments that there were 3 substantial injuries by our players on our visiting team during that football game, 2 of them season-ending injuries. And if the parents actually hadn't been in the stadiums, the coaches and the staff there would have been put in a really awkward situation for treatment for those injuries. Children would have been transported by, who knows, maybe the ambulance to the hospital, maybe a bus driver, maybe some other parent, maybe a coach would have had to leave. But these are things that need to be considered, and I want my comment to be noted.
Thank you, Jamie. Other comments?
Yes.
Hello?
I don't know if you've called out any more telephone numbers, 59 ending in 59.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is Scott Cruz. Give me 1 second here. And from what I'm hearing, we're not allowed to ask questions, but at the same time, the communication officer that you had downstairs or out in the streets, Steve, told us to write questions down and to make them as specific as possible. So I have a couple questions for you. First question is in section 2-G in the guidelines states only 2 tickets per home player, while section 2I directs you to appendix A in regards to 50 or larger gatherings. Why does this appendix not apply to football games and spectators at football games? So why does appendix A not apply to spectators at football games?
Okay, so I've noted that question into the comments. I think that Ellen probably addressed that at the top end with respect to the, I'm going to say it wrong, the Montana High School Sports Association, I think it is, but we've noted the question. Do you have another question though?
Sure. If the concern is because players are intermingling and can't socially distance from each other and are larger than 50 at the AA level, then no fans are allowed. It seems like attendance of fans will have no impact on this for the players. So in terms of pods, as one of your staff members told me yesterday, pod 1 being the players and pod 2 being the spectators, both of these pods aren't going to intermingle. So how does allowing spectators impact an increased chance of COVID amongst the players? All stadiums have the ability to control an entrance and an exit spot, as well as seating, and as well as policing via administration and parent volunteers to make sure that all guidelines are met and followed. If school districts propose plans addressing these issues, will those plans be reviewed and or accepted, or asked to be revised for more control features? And why is there an issue of attendance if spectators and players are not intermingling? They are staying socially distant from each other.
Okay. Thank you. I've noted all of these questions into the record. And Scott, just while you're still on the phone, can you spell your last name for us for the record?
Yep. C as in cat, R-E-W-S.
Thank you. I'll go again down the, because I'm not seeing any of their hands raised on the.
Hold on. I got one more thing then, please. I also would like to request another meeting to further discuss these issues and concerns so that all peoples can have their voices heard and we can have some questions answered in a formal and logical manner. I'm sure you're aware of it, but the inconsistencies from one school to the next, from one city to the next, has become infuriating to the general public. And it's getting to a boiling point now where people with positions like yours need to make decisions that are honestly the best decisions for these kids that have been affected for the past 6 months, both socially and mentally. These kids have sacrificed things for an age bracket that has lived for 60 plus years, and now they are the ones that are being punished for this virus. So I also would like to request some type of formal meeting to where we can get some answers honestly answered instead of being ducked and dodges, because I have also called into the health department and those questions aren't getting answered by those people either.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cruz. I need to move on just for the sake of time to get through the rest of the agenda. This cell phone ending in 10, do you have comments today? I'm not hearing anything there.
This is Julie. Just a reminder to people on the phone, if you didn't hear this earlier, if you're on mute, try pressing *6 to unmute yourself if you wish to give a comment.
I think there's only a couple other ones. So it would be the cell phones ending in 89 or 27 that haven't been called upon. I'm not hearing any. Julie, is there anything else over in the chat?
No,
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything else in chat.
Okay. We will close agenda item number 8 and move on to number 9, board or staff comments on items not on the agenda.
Debbie, this is Rob, and maybe I'd like to just make a request. Obviously, this is more public comment than we usually get at health board meetings, and I think asking for, an explanation and resolution full time here during the meeting is probably not realistic. But I think it would be great if we could get some just sort of brief summary to the health board about how this concern of guest parent attendance at the high school football game is being resolved or has been resolved. I'd love it if we could just get an update sometime after the meeting.
Okay, excellent. I'm sure that Ellen heard that and we'll take that up with staff. Any other board comments?
Did you also ask for staff comments?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to mention we have received calls both from the media and the public and different athletic and school groups when we about what the recommendations are when the air status is unhealthy as it currently is. And the recommendations are listed on our air quality website. They include recess for younger children, they include sports practices, and they also cover actual competitions. So it's a reminder that when the air quality is at the unhealthy status, which it is today, and it could mix up a little tomorrow, so you don't know until that happens, that competitions are recommended to not proceed. The school districts are recommended to cancel. They can choose to go forward. If they choose to go forward, then they do have to have medical response available on the field. So we have gotten a lot of calls on that, and I know we've talked a lot about COVID, but I did want to remind people that we are also in smoke season. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Any other board or staff comments before we adjourn?
Sure, I just had one. This is Josh. Just I'm wondering, it seemed like there was a lot of people out there that had questions, and just to be really clear, what's the best way for these folks to get their questions answered? And is there the potential for some event specifically around answering these questions other than typical channels?
So we do have We get a lot of questions about events, including sporting events, into environmental health, ENVHEALTH, at MissoulaCounty.us. We also get them in our portal, and then they get routed to environmental health. If they can't ask to speak to a supervisor in environmental health, I try to respond to them, but primarily I try to get them to the folks whose job it is to review and respond to all these questions. And they can also be reached at 258-4755. If people think they're not getting answered, I know that we haven't given the answers that some people think we should give, or the answers that they want, but I am aware that this topic has been asked and answered many times, perhaps not by the people that are asking questions today. So 258-4755, or that email that I gave you. You may also ask to speak to a supervisor.
Thank you, Ellen. Any other board or staff comments? Okay, with that, we will adjourn as the Board of Health and reconvene as the Air Pollution Control Board. First up on our agenda with Sarah Cofield is the Air Quality Advisory Council update.
Yes, good morning, afternoon. I don't know what time it is. So the Air Quality Advisory Council met earlier this month and had a presentation from Amara Holder, who is with the EPA's Office of Research and Development and has been really integral to a research project we've been doing here at the Health Department, looking at indoor air quality during wildfire smoke events in different buildings around the community. EPA has been really the lead on this. They provided the resources and the materials and the expertise and data analysis. They've been doing so much work. We just put up the sensors and send them the data. And so she was able to give them a presentation about what we learned last year when we had these sensors in buildings around Missoula, where we didn't really have very much smoke, but we did still learn some valuable lessons, such as if you don't have any filters, your indoor air quality is the same as the outdoor air quality. But then even with buildings all having the same level of filtration, the amount of indoor air quality can vary really widely. It's not only the filter that matters. There's a lot of other things that come into play in how your indoor air quality is affected. Unsurprisingly, one of the buildings that performed the best last year, when we had a little bit of smoke waft in, had the best filters. But we had another building with kind of middle grade filters that did okay during that little smoke event. Now, obviously, we're in our second year of doing this study. We have improved it in a lot of ways. We have sensors in buildings with a bigger variety of filtration. We have expanded out and have them in Frenchtown and City Lake, as well as Missoula. We've added door counters so we can get an idea of how often doors are opening and shutting, because that will really impact the amount of smoke that comes into a building. We've also brought on Tom Jabins, who's a local engineer, and he has been doing really in-depth assessments of every HVAC system in the study, both last year and this year, to really give us more understanding of why we might be seeing the air quality that we're seeing. So this study is still ongoing. We have sensors in a lot of buildings around Missoula right now, as well as some in Frenchtown and City Lake, so we can get an idea of what this smoke is doing indoors. Currently, it looks like a lot of it's coming inside. So we will know more once we've been able to have the data really interpreted and go through all statistical processing. One of the things that the EPA is doing, because we're using the purple air sensors that are little consumer grade, relatively inexpensive sensors, they aren't accurate out of the box. They aren't. Like, they can give you a good idea of the magnitude and direction of change in air quality, but for those really reliable numbers, they need a lot of calibrating and individualized correction formulas for every single one. So we co-located them all with a reference grade monitor for quite some time earlier this summer, so we could get those calculations for each individual sensor developed. Well, EPA did that, and they will be applying that to all of the data that we have and giving us some good results that we will be able to turn into hopefully some really actionable items and some best practices on what it takes to create cleaner indoor air spaces. So the Air Quality Advisory Council got the presentation from EPA about where we are so far in the study, and I think that was great for them. In other news, Guy Hansen, one of our members, has stepped down. I will be, per the charter, I will be offering that position to our alternates and then advertising whatever we're left with, either a full voting membership or alternate. So that's what I got.
Okay.
Kind of report.
Sarah, I just have a quick question on that. I think you answered it on the sensors not being very accurate, but are they real time? I mean, do they continuously monitor, or are they like spot checks on the actual?
They're constantly monitoring. You can get a 2-minute average or a 10-minute average or an hour average. So it is just kind of constantly going. There are some folks around town that have them running. If you pull up the purple air map, you can see a couple locations with them running. And if you do that, just, be aware that the website reports the AQI, which we don't use. It's a numerical scale that the EPA uses to describe the actual concentration. We prefer the actual concentration. And then also the actual concentration you can turn it into from purple air is not correct. So it's really just kind of watch the change, because unless you're able to apply a really good correction factor, the specific numerical value isn't really reliable, but you can definitely see the change over time, and that is, I think, really a useful resource.
Okay, awesome. Other board questions for Sarah on the Air Quality Advisory Council update? No one's even going to put you on the spot to ask when the smoke's going to blow away. I can't believe
I know,
that.
I could tell you about the smoke if you want, but if you're good.
So I don't have a question, I just have a comment. Sarah, I just want you to know you have a great following out in the community. They love your news updates, and I keep it up because the little bit of humor that you throw in there, I think really makes it easier. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you so much.
I also heard that reading your report, even when it's a bad one, is the highlight of some people's day, and I may be getting there myself, so you do a great job. Thank you.
I will
This is
also
Julie. Oh, go ahead,
Julie.
Debbie. This is Julie. A family member listens to Talkback, and Sarah was called upon, I believe, on somewhat short notice earlier this week to talk about air quality on their program one day. And subsequent to the program and some advice she gave to people, my family member was at the store taking action to follow the advice to use air filters with box fans, and there were a whole slew of other people at the store doing the same thing. So she, as my sister said, Sarah talks and Missoula listens.
It's very true. I waited, Sarah, for days, and then finally the reference to Mordor came into the report, which I was pleased about. So it's been a few years. Any public comments on items not on the agenda? I see we still have some public out there. Anything? See none. Board or staff comments on items not on the agenda? Hearing none, we will adjourn as the Air Pollution Control Board and for all boards today. Thank you, everyone, for your participation today. I appreciate it. Stay healthy and safe.
Thanks, Debbie.
Bye.
Bye.